What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the first episode of the Book Binge on the King Crusoe YouTube channel. Today is January 3rd, 2022, and we will be going through my monthly reading wrap-up and TBR. I'm going to be doing one of these on the first Monday of every single month, going over the books that I read for the previous month and the books that I will be reading for the coming month. This video, since it's my first one, I'm actually going to be going through everything that I read in 2022. Don't worry, there's not that many things. I didn't start reading again until late 2022, so it's fine. And then I'll be going over what I plan to be reading in January. So without further ado, let's kind of just go ahead and get started. As you will hear me say many times on this channel, I didn't read for probably 2 or 3 years from the time of 2018 till 2020 or so. Including into the middle of 2021. It was actually like July of 2021 that I read like 2 books, and those were the first books that I read this year. And then I didn't start reading again after that until mid-September, and I've been reading pretty consistently since then. In that time, I've only read 15 books, so there will only be actually 12 books that I will talk about in this video for what I read in 2021, because I'm choosing to redact 3 of those titles for personal reasons. So first, one of the books that I read in July was Cloudy with a Chance of Murder by G.G. Vandegrift. There are a few books on this list that are actually just short, realistic, kind of mystery-esque books that are written by LDS authors. I'm LDS. A lot of the books that we have in my house are written by LDS people. They're fine books. Like, they're genuinely pretty okay books. I'm not going to be doing reviews on these, but they're books that I enjoyed nonetheless. This one was pretty good. It actually ended pretty good as well, because let me just say that most of these LDS fiction books don't have great endings. This one ended pretty fine in my opinion. But that was the only book that I'm going to talk about that I read in July. In September, I read 2 books that I will talk about. The first one being The Wrath of Darth Maul by Ryder Windham. I'll actually have a review of this coming out in just a few weeks. This is one of my favorite books of all time. I absolutely love it. I think that everybody who has the ability to read this or pick it up do. It's only like, you can get it for, a couple bucks used probably on Amazon or eBay or something like that. They probably won't be in great condition, but you can get them. So there's that. And then the second book was In Plain Sight by Clarence Polson. This guy is actually probably like my second cousin, once or twice removed or something like that. I don't actually know how the technicalities of that kind of relation go, but I am related to him on my grandma's side. So I actually really enjoy a lot of his books. This one did not end that great. It was very good for the first 4/5 of it, but the last 1/5 of it was just disappointing. So I'll just put that up here. In October was when I really started a deep dive back into reading. I read those couple books in September, but I was just getting into the groove then. October was when I really fell back into love hardcore. And the first book that I read in October was The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien, and it is such a good book. It's very magical. I have a review coming out for this, I believe, next week. I think this is actually my first book review. I can't remember when I have that scheduled. But yeah, I really enjoy this book. You'll hear more about it in the video that comes out next Monday, so stick around for that if you want to. The second book that I'll talk about that I read in October is Shadowed by Stephanie LeBlack. This is another one of those LDS fiction books. This is actually a slow burn. It's pretty mediocre for the first 1/3 of it, but then it starts to pick up a little bit, and the last 1/3 of it is just snap pace, and I love it. Book overall is pretty okay. Like I said, it starts off way too slow, but that's fine. And now that we've gone through those 3 months, those are the 3 months that I read the redacted titles. So everything that I read in November and December will be shown in this video. So the first book that I read in November was The Lord of the Rings Part 1, Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien. There's actually a read-along going on in a Discord that I'm part of for Mike's Book Reviews. If you're interested in books, go check that out. I really enjoyed this. I had started to read it once in like 8th grade or something like that and did not get through it at all. Or that might be the time. I might be getting some of my times mixed up. But I remember I tried to read it once and got like maybe a third of the way through at most and just dropped it because it was so slow and boring. Then when I picked it up again, I think in freshman year or something like that, I read through it and read it really fast. Like, it went by super quick. I don't remember, like, loving the book, but it went by super quick. This time, it went by super quick, and I really enjoyed it. So I'm actually very happy about that. This was the first book I read in November. The second book was Carrie by Stephen King. I actually have a book review of this coming out, I think, in 2 weeks. I think it's my second book review after The Hobbit. And then Wrath of Darth Maul, I believe, is my third book review after that. I actually think I will be having reviews of all the Lord of the Rings coming out sometime in February, but we will see how that works out. Either way, I read Carrie. It was actually a lot better than I was expecting. This was a book that I've seen people rate a lot, and there are tons of people who rate it pretty mediocre, and several people who rate it pretty high. But it was a middle-of-the-road book with a great ending. I will say that most of it was like pretty 7 out of 10 for me, and then the end was very good. So if you want to hear me talk about this a little bit more, check out that video in a couple weeks when it comes out. The third book that I read in November, and you'll probably see a pattern at this point with you take into account the redacted books, I average about 3 books a month. It's not that much, but I think, 30 to 35 books in a year as a general goal is pretty reasonable for me. So anyway, third book that I read in November was Salem's Lot by Stephen King, and this blew me away. I don't know when I'll have a review of this coming, but I will be recording a review of it this weekend. I absolutely loved this book. I will talk about it in depth when I do the review. There's just too much to really mention right now. I will say that I was like, well, how good can it be? I mean, a lot of people rate it as one of Stephen King's better books, but I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it was, and I will just say I was genuinely shook and terrified in a couple sections of this book, and I was not expecting that a book could scare me, and this book did in a couple places. So there's that. Now we move on to the books that I read in December. I actually read 4 books in December, but you'll see why pretty quick. The first one was Endurance, Shackleton's Incredible Voyage by Alfred Lansing. This is actually a nonfiction biographical book based off of diaries and journal entries and first-hand accounts and interviews with all the people who went on this one specific voyage to try to cross Antarctica. It was actually a rather thrilling book. I started it in late November and intended to have it done by the end of November, but it bled over a few days into December because I wasn't reading super quick and wasn't reading it nearly as quick as I originally intended, but I did enjoy the book for what it was. Like, it's definitely one of the better nonfiction books because it reads as a sort of thriller. I'm surprised that he can cover so much in... Like, he can cover so much ground in a relatively little book, but also not let it, drag. Like, none of it drags at all. You'd be surprised by how much time this team spends doing nothing, but reading it is always thrilling. I will be recording a review of this sometime this weekend. No clue when that review is going to come out. It might just be a review that I edit and keep backhanded or backlogged just in case I don't have enough time to record something in the future and just need to get a Book Binge video out. We will see. I don't know. The second book that I read in December was Lord of the Rings Part 2, The Two Towers. Like I said, there's a read-along going in Discord that I'm part of, where Fellowship of the Ring was November, Two Towers was December, Return of the King is January, but we will talk about that a little bit. When I originally read Fellowship of the Ring freshman year, I went straight into Two Towers, but then Two Towers took me like a year and a half to read. For some reason, I remember liking it a lot more than Fellowship, because I just didn't remember that much from Fellowship. And then I never read Return of the King. This book I actually did not enjoy as much as Fellowship of the Ring. still a good book, still a very good entry. I mean, I know it's all technically supposed to read as one giant volume, but I will say that when I do a full series review of Lord of the Rings at some point in time, I'll have some opinions. But I still enjoyed this book. It definitely went a lot slower than Fellowship. I read Fellowship in probably 10 days. This one took me close to 3 weeks because I don't know why. I just was reading super slow at the time that I read Endurance and Two Towers. Next up is the third book that I read in December, and that is The Shining by Stephen King. I don't want to say too much because I will be recording a review of this. I loved this book. Now, this was one that I was very skeptical about going in. Like, you know, everybody says that this is top tier King. Like, so many people put in top 5 or top 3 Stephen King, and I'm just like, is it really that good? Like, is it really? It is. It is that good. That's all I'm going to say because I don't want to, you know, spoil any of my thoughts about it. If you were in the Discord, I was posting about my thoughts for the first 4 of the 5 parts, quite in depth in there, and I just gotta say, I absolutely loved this book, but I will talk about that in the video that I do for this. It'll probably come out in March if I'm doing my scheduling correctly with Lord of the Rings. And now, the final book that I read in 2021 was Holes by Louis Satcher. Now, this was a reread. I've read this at least once, maybe twice before. Sorry about that. I've read this once, maybe twice before. It's an all-time classic for a reason. It's a really short, quick read. I'm not somebody who generally reads through books in just 2 or 3 days, but this one is short enough and quick enough, and with, you know, Louis Satcher just does such short chapters that it's impossible to put down. So I actually read this in 2 days, which was much shorter than I expected. I expected it to take 3 or 4, but I did finish it, and this was my final December read. And I gotta say that I still really liked it. I'm probably gonna record a review of this, but it might be another situation like with Endurance, where I record it and edit it, but just keep it backlogged in case I don't have enough time to record something when I need to record something or whatever. Just have it in the background in case I need it. So that's the list of 12 books that I'm willing to disclose that I read in 2021. And now in this next section, I'm just going to go quickly into the top 5 books that I read in 2021. Because I only read 15 total and am only talking about 12 of them, it's kind of unfair to do a top 10 because that's basically all the books that I read. So I'm going to do a top 5. And normally on a list like this, I wouldn't be super inclined to do like multiple books by series or multiple books by an author. Like, I'm a little bit more loose with those kinds of rules. Like, I'm a little bit more loose with those kinds of rules than I feel like most people are, but that's fine. I'm just going to go through this right now. So, entry number 5 for the top 5 was The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien. Like I said, I still enjoyed the book. It wasn't nearly as good as Fellowship, which gives you a hint for something that's coming up, but I still really enjoyed the read, and I cannot wait to read Return of the King, because I just gotta say, Tolkien's prose is absolutely perfect. So this is number 5. Number 4 was The Hobbit. Like I said, magical book. I really enjoyed this read as well. Part of the reason I preferred it is just how much quicker and faster it is. Two Towers definitely felt like it didn't drag, but the book 4 in it, because it contains books 3 and 4. Book 4 is a little bit mixed for me, but you know, I'll discuss that in reviews for the books. But this is number 4. Number 3 is Salem's Lot. Like I said, I really enjoyed this book. It definitely surprised me in a lot of ways. It is definitely worth the read. And I'm actually glad that I read this when I did, since I'll be reading the Dark Tower series sometime in 2022. So there's number 3. Number 2 is Fellowship of the Ring by J.R.R. Tolkien. Yeah, I'm sorry to have 3 Tolkien books in this top 5, but what can you do when out of the 12 books that I read, a couple of them were rereads, and, you know, like the other 6 or something like that were by 2 authors. So, you know, it's kind of hard to really differentiate really well, but I will just say I really enjoyed Fellowship of the Ring. This is almost a 10 out of 10 book. There's only a couple problems that I have with it, and I'll talk about those in a review for this. I believe it'll be in February, but we will see about that. And then number one, as you've probably guessed by the little amount of books that I have read in 2021 and how much praise I was giving it just a minute ago, is The Shining. Like I said, I was very skeptical about how good this book could be. English is hard, and it definitely delivered. I loved every bit of this book. I cannot wait to talk about it a little bit more in depth, but I loved this. Was my number one of the year, and yes, part of that might be recency bias because I just finished it a few days ago, but when I was reading it, I read parts 1 through 4 in like 3 days or something like that, maybe 4 or 5 at most, and then I took like 2 or 3 days off, and then I read part 5 over one day after that. I just loved this book. So that's kind of my ranking for my top 5 books of 2021. And I will just go ahead and give an honorable mention to The Wrath of Darth Maul. Reason it's not in the top 5 is because it is a reread. I've probably read this 5 or 6 times. I know it's one of my favorite books of all time. It's unfair for me to put this into the top 5, but I have to give an honorable mention because if you haven't read this yet, or if you didn't even know it existed, try to find it because it's really good despite how short it is. Please watch that review, by the way. I'm really proud of that review, and I cannot wait to talk about it. And now this is the final bit of the video to do the TBR for January, what I'm going to be reading in January. As I said, I average only about 3 books per month. If I'm lucky, I can get through 4 if some of them are really short or really quick, because even though The Shining is a really long book, like significantly longer than The Two Towers is, I read The Shining in just a few days comparatively. But let's get into the TBR. I probably just teased it a little bit. The first book that I'll be reading, that I might be starting tonight on December 31st, but probably not until January 1st, is Return of the King. As I said, that read-along, Return of the King, takes place in January. I've never read this one, even though I've read Fellowship and Two Towers. I've never read Return of the King, so I cannot wait to finish this and see how the ending occurs in the book. I have watched the movies before, but that was so many years ago, I don't remember much of anything, except for the ultimate conclusion that everybody knows about. And because I'm loving it so much, I'm actually going to read through all the appendices in this as well, because, you know, why not? I love the way that Tolkien writes, and all of the history of the world and everything. It's really good. So I'm excited to read this. This will be the first book that I read in January. Pretty much immediately after I finish that, depending on how long it takes me, because if it takes me as long as it took me to read Two Towers, it'll take me a bit. But if I read it as fast as I read Fellowship, who knows? But the book that I'll be reading after Return of the King is The Gunslinger. I hinted at this when I talked about Salem's Lot just a minute ago. I'm going to be starting The Dark Tower in January in that Discord again, Mike's Book Reviews Discord. We're going to be doing a read-along of The Dark Tower starting on the 19th of January. I'll probably be starting this book a little bit earlier than that, but we'll be doing a read-along of this series with 1 book per month, or the 7 books over the course of January through July. I'm going to be reading Wind Through the Keyhole as well in the middle there, but I'm excited to start this series because I have really enjoyed a lot that Stephen King has written, and despite varying opinions on a lot of the books in the series, I cannot wait to read The Gunslinger, and besides, it's pretty short, so I'm happy about that. Can't really say the same thing for a couple of the other books in the series, but there's the second book I'll be reading in January. The third book will be The Lightning Thief, Percy Jackson and the Olympians, #1 by Rick Riordan. I've read this book before. I think I've read it 2 times before. I might be misremembering. It's possible that I've read it 3 times, but I've read this book at least 2 times. I've read this series at least 2 times, but I'm rereading and reading everything that I own, and that includes these, plus I want to kind of talk about the series and whatnot at some point on the channel if I can. I absolutely love the book and the series. I want to see if it still holds up after not reading it for probably 5 or more years. I'm sure it does, but I cannot wait to start this again. And then the fourth and final book that I'll be reading in January, or hope to read, I will at least be starting it in January, because I'm pretty sure I'll be able to read these 3 books and have plenty of time to spare. So I'll be starting or hope to start a 4th book in January. And that isn't this entire chonker, but it'll be the first book in this 3-book collection, The Andromeda Strain by Michael Crichton. I've read 2 Michael Crichton books before. Predictably, those are Jurassic Park and The Lost World, and I loved those. That was many years ago, but I do plan to go through reading all of Crichton's work. So I'm going to be starting with The Andromeda Strain, and be starting that in late January, assuming I have time. I hope to have time, but this is going to be a busy month of video making. So there's that. This will be the conclusion of this episode of the Book Binge. I hope you enjoyed it. I want to thank everybody who stuck around through the video. If you want to be able to see the backlog of all the YouTube content that I'm creating right now and will be creating in the future, as well as all of my writing, because I am self-publishing on my website right now. If you want to see all of that in one place easily, go to seasonalproductions.com and bookmark it. Today's the day that this video releases is January 3rd. The website launches January 1st, so it's already available by the time this video is available. So go there, read anything you want, watch anything you want. It would really mean a lot to me. If you just want to watch the YouTube content and don't care about my writing, just leave a like and subscribe and ring the bell, do all the YouTube stuff that I feel obligated to say because YouTube. So that's the end of this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll be back again in the next one.